Do you have a biblical worldview? Does your child have a biblical worldview? What is a biblical worldview? Well, the pollster George Barna for many years has done a survey to try and discover how many Americans have a biblical worldview. And he puts forth 8 questions that try and give what a biblical worldview would be. Not in super detail, but that detail from about 5 or 10,000 feet. Here are the 8 questions. And as I read these 8 questions, I want you to ask yourself, would you say yes or no to these questions? Question 1, do absolute moral truths exist? Question 2, is absolute truth defined by the Bible? Question 3, did Jesus Christ live a sinless life? Question 4, is God the all-powerful and all-knowing creator of the universe, and does he still rule it today? Question 5, is salvation a gift from God that cannot be earned? Question 6, is Satan real? Question 7, does a Christian have a responsibility to share his or her faith in Christ with other people? And finally, question 8, is the Bible accurate in all of its teachings? Now, I may take issue with one of these questions as maybe being a little unclear, and that's question 2. Is absolute truth defined by the Bible? Well, technically, no, it's defined by Jesus, but maybe we could let that go. And that question might get people to think, well, there's truths outside the Bible, so maybe I should answer no to that. That might be a bad question. But overall, I think the other 7 are pretty good. In any event, very few people answered yes to all of these questions. And in fact, only 9% of people who claim to be born again answered yes to all of those questions. Well, what's the implication of this for us? What is the implication of the findings of George Barna for our kids and our grandkids? And what can we do about it? Because very few people appear to have a biblical worldview. And one of the most difficult things is not only for us as parents to have a biblical worldview, but how can we pass that on to our kids so they make decisions not according to their whims, not according solely to their desires, not solely according to TikTok or any other social media platform, but according to the Bible? What can we do about it? Well, in order to help us through that, we have a former public school teacher and now a teacher, an apologist that teaches course with us, the great Shanda Fulbright. She's been on the program before. Here she is again. Shanda, how are you?
Thanks, Frank. I'm good. How about you?
I am just swell, although I will say that this show is going to be a challenge because, in my opinion, this is one of the more difficult things to do, not only as a parent, but even just as an individual. How do you ensure you have a biblical worldview if we, in fact, think the Bible is true? And of course we do. We've given evidence for that. How do we have a biblical worldview? And then how do we make decisions based on a biblical worldview? And then how do we, more importantly, even instill that on our kids so they make decisions? Let me start out by asking you this, Shanda. You were actually in the California public school teacher for many years. In your experience, as you look back, how did kids in your classroom, how did they make decisions? What motivated them to do what they did? Can you give us some pointers? It probably wasn't the Bible, was it?
Definitely not. Definitely not the Bible. Kids they move by what they feel, what feels good. They're very spur of the moment. So you don't teach critical thinking as much in the public education system. There is a schedule that you have to go by, standards that you have to teach. So you're moving, especially in a self-contained classroom like I was in, you're constantly moving from one thing to the other with a bunch of kids on different levels. Attention spans are short. You don't have a lot of parental involvement in the public education system. And so kids are there and I wouldn't say that their number one goal is to learn. They're worried about recess, making friends, getting to play. And so there's just overall, there's a bunch of different challenges with public education than there are with what we do on online Christian courses, where it's much more intentional, and parents who are thinking about a biblical worldview for their kids are more intentional with signing their kids up for these classes, meaning the kids are more intentional when they're with us, even on a Zoom. So the public education system has its own sets of challenges, and kids, I wouldn't say their number one goal is to come and see what they can learn today.
You said they don't teach critical thinking in the public school system. Why do you think that is? And why not? Why wouldn't you at least early on teach kids how to think through, say, a course in logic?
I think from what I've seen in my experience with the public education system, it's more teaching to the test. And when you teach to the test, you teach answers. You teach what to think, not how to think. And I don't know that the public education system, like the principals, aren't thinking that, about, wow, we're taking away critical thinking skills, or we're not giving critical thinking skills to our students. They're thinking about achievement, how the numbers are going to look on the test, and how that's going to look for the district and overall the state. And so when you have a different focus, you're going to get a different outcome. So I don't know that it's an intentionality not to teach critical thinking per se, to say we are not going to teach them how to think or logic. I think their number one goal is to make sure those assessments they look good on paper, and that's not the focus for public education. It's all teaching to the test.
So they're teaching to the test. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't even thought of this until right this second, but right now there's a controversy going on, obviously, in our government about the Department of Education. And I am not an expert on how the whole system works. I did speak to a friend of mine, though, today, who is heavily involved in public education. And she told me, again, she just mentioned it to me, I haven't verified it, but about 40% of the money, at least here in North Carolina, for public education comes from the feds. Okay. So, when you were in California, were you trying to teach your kids to pass a test that came from the feds or from the state, or both? How did that work?
It's mostly from the state. So every state has a set of content standards. And so you can go on any state, their Department of Education, and see what their standards are. So now I live in South Carolina. The standards are similar, but they are somewhat different. So we're teaching, I know the California state standards very well for 5th grade. I know what my students had to know by the end of 5th grade. And so that's what they held me accountable for. However, when you get 32 students who have to learn 5th grade standards, according to that state set standards, you're not getting 32 kids who are ready for 5th grade content because they're falling through the cracks and they don't know 4th grade standards. So those standards are set by the state and they get funding from the state. But the last place to get the funding is the actual classroom. The classroom teacher does not have, if she gets a budget at all, it's probably like $200 to $250 for the entire year. There was a lot of money going out of pocket for extra things for my students that we weren't guaranteed by our district. So where that money goes to is always the question mark, especially for teachers. We're the last ones to get the funding.
What were some of the eccentric things you were supposed to teach? I assume it was evolution. I assume it was DEI kind of, and hopefully maybe that stuff, particularly the DEI material, will be taken out, although maybe not at the state level. It's taken out at the Fed level. Is that the kind of stuff you had to teach too?
Well, that's the thing about people have to understand when you have instruction, when you get a teacher's guide, and you know that if I have to teach theme in a school, like the content standards for 5th grade and many grades in elementary school are going to teach kids how to identify the theme in the word. That's pretty broad. But I can go around the standards and teach my own ideology as a teacher according to that standard.
All right, hang on. Hold the thought, Shanda. We're going to come back and we're going to, as we bring up some problems with public education, we're going to give you somewhat of a solution toward the end of the program. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist with me, Frank Turek, on the American Family Radio Network. Back in 2 minutes. What can you do to help your child have a biblical worldview so they make decisions based on the truth, based on the Bible, not based on the culture, what their friends want to do, not even what they necessarily want to do? We're talking about that today in the context of education. And just before the break, we were talking to Shanda Fulbright, my guest today, who teaches online courses for us at onlinechristiancourses.com. And Shanda, you were talking something about a theme in the standards, the state standards for public education. And you didn't break. So what do you mean by a theme? And what does that mean with regard to teaching?
Okay, so DEI, you asked about DEI. Yeah. DEI, homosexuality, transgenderism. I mean, name a big thing, a controversial topic that we're talking about today, that is not written into the California state standards. So you do not have to teach kids about, DEI, racism. What happens is,
at least as it was when you were there, it might have changed.
No, it hasn't, because you can go on the California state standards and look at it now for each grade level. You won't find that that's written into the standards. How you get that injected into the standard is a broad subject. I had to teach theme to my students. How to identify theme in any literature. I can choose any book I want as a teacher, present it to my students and say, we're going to identify the theme in this book. You can have several different themes. You can have differences. You can have friendship, all into the same literature. So what a teacher can do is, if their worldview entails thinking that transgenderism is this great thing and we need to support it, they can show a book to their students or give a book to their students based on that theme, and they can teach that standard to their kids. That's how you get these TikTok teachers who will say, I'm not sure if I should be identified as a miss, a mix, a mister. I'm still trying to figure out, and I teach 4-year-olds. That's a real TikTok. I just saw it the other day, and it's not written into the standards. So that's why I said, if you're going to teach, when you look at a teacher, you look at the instructor and you put your kid in that class, you have to think about how that instructor presents the instruction, because that instructor has a worldview, whether it's in a public education system, whether it's in a Christian school. And just so you know, Frank, my 5th grader, my youngest, he was read the book, Julian Wants to Be a Mermaid. And when I contacted the teacher and confronted her about it, she said, I'm sorry, I was teaching theme in class and I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And I said, okay, well, as a mom, that I don't want my kid to be taught transgender books in school.
Well, one solution, and I'm going to be bringing this up at appropriate times this year as we talk about different topics. One solution, parents, that you can bring to your kids is Brave Books, because Brave Books puts out, they're a Christian book company. You may have seen Kirk Cameron talk about them. He's part of this. They put out books for kids that give the truth on these issues. And you just mentioned, what was it? Julian what? Julian
wants to be a mermaid.
Julian wants to be a mermaid. Well, their counter to that, I'm looking at the book right now, I have some for my grandkids, is elephants are not birds. Elephants are not birds. So look up Brave Books. Parents, grandparents, you can get these books. You, in fact, can get one every month if you want, if you sign up for their monthly book. But Elephants Are Not Birds is a book that you can get. I was reading one of them to my grandson last night. He was intrigued by it. He wanted to read it twice. Okay. So that's a way to teach your kids at home. Get Brave Books. But Shanda, so, okay, they leave. You got to teach a theme. Well, a theme of any book. It could be a transgender book. It could be Julian Wants to Be a Mermaid, or Heather Has Two Mommies, or whatever you want. So that gets infiltrated in there. But isn't it true that by default, the public school worldview is secularism or atheism because God is deliberately kept out?
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Evolution, Darwinian evolution is what they teach.
Oh, so Darwinian evolution is in the standards then, right?
It is, yes. Creationism obviously is not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said, like, when you're looking at Texas just passing this new law where they said, let's go ahead and make an optional curriculum. It's not even demanded that they teach this. Let's make an optional curriculum where we embed some Bible verses into these certain subjects, like I believe it's social studies, and give the teachers this carrot of $60 a student to teach it. Well, okay, that's all fine and dandy. It probably sounds nice to some Christian parents. However, that kid is still going to be exposed to Darwinian evolution in the public education system in Texas, especially by the time he gets into 10th grade, because that's when they really get into the weeds on it, but they start teaching it even before that. So you're going to have a fragmented instruction for a kid going to school, even if that elementary school teacher decides to take the optional curriculum with Christianity embedded into it. The public education system is not going to give your child a biblical worldview, even if they give them a couple Bible verses.
Ladies and gentlemen, either we were made in the image of God or we were not made in the image of God. Those are the only two choices. And the evolutionary worldview tries to say we were not. Now, that has implications not only on behavior, but implications on outlook in life. Suicide rates have gone way up over the past several decades among our young people. And part of the reason could be that we're teaching them there's really no meaning to life. There's nothing special about them. There is no purpose. You know, just do what you want to do when you want to do it with whom you want to do it. That's what success is all about. Get a whole bunch of money, you know, have a whole bunch of sex, you know, that's what life is really all about. Is that true or not? Either it is or it isn't. Mm-hmm. Well, the evidence shows it's not true, that there is a meaning and purpose to life. You were made in the image of God. There is a purpose to your life. There is a life beyond the grave. There's a certain way to live life and a certain way not to live life. And so we as parents have to ensure that our kids are being taught properly. It is actually not the public school teachers. It's not the private school teachers. It's not the homes. It's not the, well, if you're a homeschooler, you're probably a parent. It's not the youth pastors' responsibility to teach your kids. It's your responsibility. And why don't we talk about worldview broadly now, Shanda? What does it even mean to teach kids a worldview?
Well, it teaches kids. I have a couple definitions here. One of them is a little bit more simple because we want to make sure that even when we put this into our Expedition to Reality curriculum, kids understand what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's more like your big picture of life, all of your beliefs that help drive your decisions and your choices. But I like the definition by Martha McAuliffe in her book, Undivided, Developing a Worldview Approach to Biblical Integration. She says it's one's foundational beliefs thought to be true, because we all think our beliefs are true, which answers life's biggest questions about reality, knowledge, and values, and form a coherent frame of reference for thinking and acting. So when we teach kids a worldview, we teach them that, you know, when you ask people, what is Christianity? They're going to say it's a religion. It's true. They're going to say it's a relationship. That's true. But Christianity is also a worldview because Christianity makes claims about reality. So when we teach kids a biblical worldview, we're teaching them the foundation of Scripture and how to look at Christianity from a worldview perspective, how to make decisions and choices based upon what the Bible says. That's first. And so that's what we do in the Expedition to Reality. We lay that groundwork of those 8 questions that Barna asked to figure out who has a biblical worldview. We get into the weeds on that and talk about that. And then one thing that we have to understand is, and I don't know that people actually think about this as much, like worldview is intentional. It's intentionally happening. Your kid's worldview is being formed by the time that they're 13. But one thing I've noticed, Frank, is that in the teens and 20s, that's when kids start asking the questions that we're answering in this curriculum. And so they're really trying to figure out and test their worldview to say, is what I've been taught my whole life true? And then they start to articulate their worldview. They start speaking what they believe and acting on it. And so one thing that is also important is that we're not giving kids the answers to these big questions. We call them the existential questions, the questions of existence. So there is a study by a digital marketing company that shows that people are going to Google for the existential questions of life. What happens after I die? How did I get here? And those are all worldview questions. And then finally, teaching kids worldview is teaching them critical thinking. You're teaching them to look at the claims of all of these worldviews and religions and really saying, okay, you're making these claims. Do these add up to reality? Are these things worth living by? And when you do that and you hand them the tools to figure out what is true and what isn't, then it helps them own their faith. And that's really what you want, because by the time a child goes to college, we talk about this all the time, 75% of those that have been raised in church or have been in the church leave because they're being challenged on the things that they've already should have challenged themselves when they were at home.
Well, you mentioned Expedition to Reality. That's actually a new course that Shanda's about to teach for 7th to 9th graders. We'll tell you about that later, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to teach them worldview. But I know there's probably people thinking out there, Shanda, right now, look, I teach my kids Bible verses. Doesn't that suffice?
I don't want to take away from teaching Bible verses because we have to. Like that is the foundation for everything, especially as in a Christian home. So we should teach them because biblical literacy is the path to a biblical worldview. However, too many Christians compartmentalize their faith and they don't teach the kids to go beyond the Bible story. Like, how do I go from the knowledge of the word to the understanding of it? Literacy itself means to not only to be able to read something, but to read with understanding and then apply it. If you can't read to understand, to apply, you're not truly literate. And that's what we want to do with our kids. We want to teach them the Bible stories, but we want to build on that and show them the meaning of those stories in our lives as we live them and apply them. And if you're only talking about them and compartmentalizing them, then they're not getting a true biblical worldview. And that's what Nancy Pearcey talks about in her book, Total Truth, that Christians compartmentalize their Christianity, and kids aren't getting that wholeness, the integrity of who you say you are and how you live.
Yeah, little snippets of truth in Bible verses, while they may be important, if you don't have the big picture, they're not going to be able to hold you through a big crisis. You need to know the big picture and not just snippets of the Bible. So you need to have a biblical worldview, and we'll tell you how to get it as we go on in the program here. I want to mention that this Wednesday, Lord willing, I'll be at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska on Lincoln's birthday. Anyone near Lincoln, Nebraska would love to see you. It's open to everyone. Go to our website for details. It'll also be live streamed, so check it out. And then next week on the 20th, William and Mary University in Williamsburg. Hope to see you there. We're back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have a biblical worldview? What does that even mean? Well, there are 8 questions you need to answer to get at least a good idea of what a biblical worldview is. We talked about them at the top of the program. But more importantly, as parents and grandparents, we also want to make sure that our kids and grandkids have a biblical worldview, not just a scattered understanding of, say, biblical texts, but have them see the big picture and be able to interpret their experience by a robust biblical worldview so they can get through life, not only just survive life, but thrive as a disciple of Jesus, as an ambassador for Jesus, so they can know God and make him known. That's why we're here, friends, to know God and to make him known. Not just know him intellectually, but to know him volitionally, to grow in him and to bring him to the rest of the world. God gave us a purpose here to know him and to make him known. So how can we do that personally? How can we do that for our kids? We're talking to Shanda Fulbright, former California public school teacher, now teaching at Online Christian Courses. In fact, she has several courses. Shanda, the courses that you've already taught, other than Expedition of Reality, which is about to start later this month, what are the other ones that you've taught? I know that there's one on logic that is very popular. What are the other courses?
We wrote Let's Get Real. That's based off of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which has been great. I think we've taught that 3 or 4 times
And
already.
that's 6th to 8th grade, right?
That's 6th to 8th grade, yes.
Right.
And then we have Train Your Brain, Introduction to Logic. That is always fun because you see a huge transformation in kids from beginning to end. I mean, they start calling out parents. I get emails from parents telling me they're at Costco, they're, shopping, they're driving in the car. And even my son took it, Frank, last year, and everything. My husband told him like 2 weeks ago, Brody, everything's not a fallacy, but it has taught him to think so well. And I'm impressed with it, even in my own life. So that one has been fun. This one I'm equally as excited about because we get to talk about, we're bringing in history, we're bringing in entertainment, we're bringing in Taylor Swift songs that where you see new age embedded into it. And the kids are evaluating all this stuff, like the things that they see online and the things that they hear from their friends. They're going to be evaluating those things and looking at the worldview behind them. If parents thought their kids were annoying with Train Your Brain, I cannot wait to annoy you with what they learn with Expedition to Reality. It's going to be a blast.
Oh, and they get excited about it too. Yeah. If you go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses, you'll see it there. Expedition to Reality. We're taking them on an expedition through all sorts of different worldviews, ultimately to reality, the true worldview, the Christian worldview, and they're going to have a lot of fun doing it. And it's going to bring, as you said, entertainment and other cultural aspects into the course. So yeah, they're going to be impossible to live with, aren't they? After they take this course. Yeah. By the way,
yes, I can't wait. I'm so proud.
The Train Your Brain course. We even have parents take it, even though it's written for 6th to 8th graders, because parents they go, I didn't know this. Yeah, I never had a course in logic either until I went to seminary. In fact, I had a master's degree and I didn't know how to deal with, there are no moral absolutes. Like, how do you even deal with that? Or there is no truth. I didn't even know that there is no truth is self-defeating. I was never taught logic. And I had a master's degree.
Are you saying you didn't always know what you know now? I think we should all be encouraged.
That's right. So anyway, we'll tell you more about that as the program unfolds. But how about some of the common questions kids ask about other religions? What are some of the common questions they ask? And I know you're going to address some of these in the Expedition to Reality as well. What are some of the common questions they ask about other religions?
All right. So true story. 2 months ago, my friend from California called me and she said, Madeline asked me, why do we believe, like we claim the Bible is the word of God, but the Muslims claim that the Quran is the word of God. How do we know who's right? And she said, I didn't know what to tell her. I'm like, well, you're going to tell her what we tell them, what we're teaching our kids in Expedition to Reality. And so that's one of the things that kids are going to ask. And then another thing they're going to ask is it okay for Christians to believe in karma? Galatians 6 tells us whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. And karma is kind of the same, completely not the same. I don't know if kids are really going to get into Galatians 6, but they do believe in karma. There is a high percentage of Christians who believe in karma. And actually, George Barna tells us that stat is pretty overwhelming. I looked it up. 75%.
Oh, believe in karma. Yeah, 75% do, according to Barna. Yeah. And they're like, if I put positivity out into the universe, it's going to come back to me. If it's negativity, it's going to come back negativity. So we talk about that and the difference between those claims, because when you look at the claims of what the kids are asking, they sound very similar. So they're going to say, well, who's right, who's wrong, or why is it wrong? And then meditation. I get this one from adults a lot, being online. I'm assuming you might too, Frank, is like, why can't we meditate? What's wrong with meditation? The Bible tells us to meditate on the word of God. So kids and adults want to know what the difference is between the new age meditation and meditation on the word and what the Bible says about it. So another thing kids will ask is they get confused by the terminology of God. So many people believe in God. In fact, if you're ever watching the Grammys, the Emmys, whatever these award shows are, and you get a star who goes behind a podium, they're going to say, first and foremost, I want to thank God for my talent, and they go on and on, but they're never being specific about their God. So like Andrew Tate now converted to Islam, he believes in God. So when you look at Judaism, you look at Christianity, you look at Islam, they're all theistic religions. And how do you know
which one are they the same God? Are these different gods? And so we get into the description of who God is and the attributes of God and what makes the Christian God stand out from those other religions and why, even though you might use the word God, they're not the same. And so kids, they hear these things and they want clarification on it. And that's what we do in this course.
You know, our mutual friend, Natasha Crane, I've mentioned her book several times on this program because it's very insightful. The book, she got a new one called When Culture Hates You, but the book she wrote before that was called Faithfully Different. And I thought it was very insightful when she said that the secular mind thinks this way, that feelings are the ultimate guide, happiness is the ultimate goal, judging is the ultimate sin, and God is the ultimate guess. Like, we don't know whether God exists or not. And so Christians are told to shut up about your God because we really don't know if your God exists or not. Look, I'm just following my feelings towards happiness. That's why you can't judge me, because that's the way you're supposed to make decisions. Now, I would submit to you, Shanda, that probably a majority of Christians make their decisions in that same manner. It's based on feelings because they want to be happy. They're not on a truth quest. They're on a happiness quest. They say stupid things like, thou shalt not judge. Jesus never said that. Oh, yeah, he said, judge not. But they went on to say, judge not lest you be judged. He's not talking about don't judge at all. He's saying don't judge hypocritically. So if people are going to make decisions based on happiness and based on their feelings, I mean, adults are going to do that. Don't you think kids are going to do it the same way?
Yeah, of course. I'm getting ready. I was just studying before this. There's this reel of kids who are talking about being gay. And they're like, what do you mean? Why would anybody not be mad at somebody, a gay couple getting married? Another one was like, they're happy. All the words that these kids used to come to this conclusion was emotional words. And they're so young, they've heard this. This is a trained, because again, worldview formation is intentional. So, and what I mean by that is it's intentionally happening. It's going to happen. They're going to form a worldview by the environment and whatever they're exposed to, regardless of whether or not parents are intentional to teach it. So you have to be intentional to teach and form that worldview, or their surroundings and the environment is going to do that. And that's why kids learn to, you say it all the time, Frank, we talked about it in Let's Get Real. You do not determine the truth based upon how you feel. You discover the truth based upon reality, based upon facts and good reason. And that's what you have to teach kids. So we live in this culture that feels our way through. Of course, kids are going to pick up on that. And that's how they're going to think something is true, something isn't. If I'm mad about it, it mustn't be true. If it makes me happy, it must be true. And the problem is that George Barna talks about is that now we're talking about people who claim to be Christians here. This isn't outside the church. These are people who are saying, I belong to the church. 2% of parents with kids under the age of 13 in that worldview development, window. Only 2% of parents with kids under 13 have a biblical worldview. So no wonder why you get a phone call from a friend who says, I don't know how to answer that question. And I'm not going to knock parents because I didn't used to know how to answer that question. I had to go find out for my kids how to answer the question of Quran, Bible, which one do I trust? But the fact is that if you don't know, you got to go find the answer. We don't just brush it off and leave it to the kids to hopefully figure it out one day. Because I have a question for you, Frank. Guess who was raised in the church, baptized a Lutheran, and then when he got to college, he left Christianity?
Guess who?
Yeah. Can you think? I mean, it can be almost anybody, right?
Anybody. Yeah. Who are you thinking of?
Karl Marx.
Oh, Karl Marx.
Karl Marx.
Okay.
It's like, what I'm saying is like, he was influenced by his teachers, and it goes in line with that statistic that we talk about. 3 out of 4 kids who leave the home, their parents are thinking, all right, they're going to survive out there in, the university. And then the teachers sway them because again, these claims have to be tested in the environment of a Christian home and a family that's supporting it biblically, not when they go out to the universities where it's going to be challenged.
Yeah, it should go without saying, but maybe we need to say it because if you go by your feelings, if feelings are your guide, you're going to wind up in a very dark place, because we all have feelings we ought not act on. And the principled restraint of destructive feelings is called civilization. You can't just act on every feeling you have. And if happiness is your ultimate goal, well, you can do a lot of things that might at least temporarily make you happy, but long-term are going to destroy you and destroy every relationship you have. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, there are all sorts of things that might make you happy short term, that you'll lie, you'll cheat, you'll steal, you'll commit adultery, you'll do all sorts of things that'll make you happy over the short term. But if that's your method, you're going to wind up probably addicted, broken, alone, divorced, and probably prematurely dead if you pursue happiness directly by your feelings.
Yeah. And teaching kids critical thinking is teaching them the discipline of examining, slowing down, and not being impulsive. If you're acting on feelings, you're being impulsive. If you teach them critical thinking, you're disciplining their mind.
Yeah, all the data show that kids that can put off instant gratification turn out later in life to be much more successful than kids that cannot. And of course, that applies to adults too. If you can't put off instant gratification, if you can't say no to your impulses, I'm sorry, you're going to live a life full of pain and suffering, and it'll probably be very short. Much more right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about how to instill a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview in your kids. And there is a way you can do it in a more professional way, not just to children, but to adults as well. And that is, come take our Cross-Examine Instructor Academy course online. You know, we do CIA every year in the summer. This year, it's going to be in July into August down at Grace Community Church in Sarasota, Florida. It was just there last weekend. Great church. But if you can't make it to Sarasota, the next best thing is to take it online. The 4 instructors that will help you evaluate your preaching, not just preaching, but teaching and question answering skills are myself, Greg Kokel, Elisa Childers, and Natasha Crane. You're going to present to us via Zoom, and we're going to evaluate you. But then you'll also get the benefit of many other instructors. If you want to see who they are, go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. You'll see CIA pop up, online CIA. And you better sign up soon, because that course fills up very quickly. We only have, I think, 24 presenting slots, and they go very quickly. So check that out. CIA. When you're up there at online Christian courses, again, go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. You'll see it there. You'll also see a course called Expedition to Reality. That's the one we're talking about today with the instructor, the main instructor, Shanda Fulbright. Actually, Shanda and I put the whole curriculum together. And I think, although it's built for 7th to 9th graders, anybody can take it in the self-paced version. We're going to keep the premium version with Zoom sessions just for 7th to 9th graders, because we'll speak to them at their level, which is usually probably above the adult level. But if you want to take it in a self-paced version, just like we do for the Logic course, you might want to avail yourself of that. But let's talk about, how do you, Shanda, we're talking to Shanda Fulbright, how do you instill a Christian worldview into kids? You talk about 3 I's. How do you do that? What are the 3 I's? You
have to consider the instructor, because what you want is a cohesive framework for biblical worldview, right? So you have to consider the instructor. Again, every instructor, teacher has a worldview. And so you want to make sure that you can hand any teacher a teacher guide and say, teach from that, but they will not, looking at a teacher's guide and then integrating those concepts and that curriculum into every aspect or every subject will not happen without a biblical worldview. So that's first and foremost. And obviously with online Christian courses, you're going to get instructors, no matter what class you take, with a biblical worldview. And then again, that goes for Christian education. Don't just think because you're taking your kid to a Christian school that all of those teachers have a biblical worldview. My youngest son now goes to a Christian school, and that's one of the questions I asked the administrator. How do you hire your teachers? How do you know that they have a biblical worldview? I asked them questions just as much as they vetted us. And then another thing you have to consider is the instruction. The instruction has to be produced and created by someone with a biblical worldview. Every teacher's manual, teacher's guide, curriculum is created by somebody with a worldview. Every reel you watch, video you watch on YouTube, book you read, it's created by somebody with a worldview. So you want to make sure that the instruction is also integrating the Bible into concepts like history, science, across all subjects. So you have to consider that. And then integration, when you look at the word integrity, it means wholeness. So when somebody says, I am a Christian, you look for the rest of the evidence of that in their speech and in their life. And when you have a Christian who says, I'm a Christian and I live by the standard of the word of God, and then I live out that standard, there's integrity in the claim, I'm a Christian. So you look for that in the integration of the instructor, the instruction into an integrated overall educational framework. And that's how you create a student, because really in that sense, they're a disciple. If you have all of those components, you integrate that into the curriculum and you get a disciple, you get a student with a biblical worldview. And that, all of those things, the instructor, the instruction, and the integration are all intentional. You have to be intentional about where you put those into place. And then that means the student is immersed into a environment that nurtures a biblical worldview with exclusive content and exclusive, I would say standards, a biblical standard, all cross subjects. And so that's what we look for. That's how you think of it as an educator. That's how you get a productive and effective instruction that's more likely to yield up a kid with a biblical worldview.
And that's how you are going to teach it in the Expedition to Reality, a new course that is for 7th to 9th graders, but anybody can take it. Parents can take it in the self-paced version. We just want the premium version where you do these live Q&A sessions to be just 7th to 9th grade. I'm sure if you had an intelligent 6th grader, or even maybe a 10th grader, they could probably squeeze in there as well. But go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses as well. Yeah, intentional is very important. And as we know, most kids today are intentionally discipled by their iPhone. In fact, I know how my life is going to end, Shanda. What's going to happen is one of my children will unplug my life support to charge their phone. That's what's going to happen, okay? It might be my grandchildren at that point. You know, hey, Pop, I need that. You know, because that's how addicted not only kids are, but adults are to their phone. We've talked about it on this show before. Jonathan Haidt, the psychologist up there at NYU, wrote the book, The Anxious Generation. He's not a Christian. I think he's an atheist, but he says, I would never give my kid an iPhone. I would never give my kid a Droid because it's making them anxious. They don't know how to process all this information. They're having all sorts of bad ideas and misinformation coming in. You say, well, it's too late. I've already given my kid an iPhone or a Droid. Hey, sorry, parenting is hard. You might have to take it away. If you want parenting to be convenient, don't be a parent because it's not convenient. It's a struggle. And if you want to instill in your kid a biblical worldview, you just can't give them license to see whatever they want on the internet, streaming into their hands, 16, 17 hours a day. And you get how much time teaching them a biblical worldview?
Well, you can't do it. If you split the kid's day up into a pie chart, you're only going to get a third of time sleeping, a third of time in school or, learning, and a third of the time is on their phone now for kids. It's very young, like around 10 and up into the teenage years. There's no way that phone is not discipling them because, again, if you're looking at it through an immersive experience, they're immersed into the content of their phone. And the app of influence is TikTok. So, that's where you get a lot of opinions about the transgender craze and the social contagions and things. So it's very much a discipler. And I think we brush it off because we think we're choosing the content, but the algorithm figures you out faster than you think you're choosing that content. And it puts you in this little world. And if that's all you see, then it really is learning you faster than you learn it.
Yeah, you ever notice when you do a Google search, I'm looking for sneakers. Suddenly you're getting ads for sneakers everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, how did this happen?
We say it all the time. It hurt us. It hurt our conversation.
That's right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Expedition to Reality is brand new. Natasha, I'm thinking Natasha Crane. I'm just looking at her book here. Shanda and myself pulled this curriculum together. Here's lesson 1. What is a worldview? Lesson 2, Christianity. Lesson 3, false Christianity. So your kid's going to learn about Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, progressive Christianity. Lesson 4 is all about Islam. Lesson 5 is all about Marxism. Lesson 6 is about New Age spirituality. Lesson 7 is the doctrine of original sin, including free will, human nature, temptation, sin. And of course, lesson 8 is the worldview question. What is our destiny? Where are we going? Who is God? Who is Jesus? Why is he so offensive to some people? What about eternity? What is the good news? What is the gospel? You're going to get all that in this course, The Expedition to Reality. So go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. You will see it there. And your 7th to 9th grader can enroll, of course, 6th to 10th. Okay, fine. Right. But sign up soon because this is going to fill up quickly. This is the first time we're teaching it. And there can't be many things more important than teaching your kids a biblical worldview. It will serve them the rest of their lives. So get them enrolled quickly. Shanda, before we go here, we do have just a couple of minutes. You also have your own podcast. What is your podcast? Where can people listen to it?
My podcast is called Her Faith Inspires, and I take cultural issues and we talk about how to look at those from a biblical perspective. So maybe I think sometimes things you won't hear in church. We talk about even the bishop who prayed and scolded Trump the day after the inauguration, and talking about just how we should be handling speaking it up for biblical truth in the culture that we're in and not being afraid of it. So there's a lot of things that I take on culturally, and I like to say I'm looking at it from a biblical worldview, a biblical perspective, because Christians need to see how you take the Bible and you integrate that into these topics. We don't compartmentalize, again, the Bible or Christianity from these things. We have to speak into them from that perspective. So that's what I love to do on my podcast. And
what's your website?
ShandaFulbright.com.
ShandaFulbright.com. Check it out. And for these courses that Shanda teaches, go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. You'll see 3 of them now for kids.
3 of them.
Give the 3 again.
Let's Get Real, Train Your Brain, An Expedition to Reality. And one of my favorite lessons in this course, Frank, is lesson 5, when we talk about the 20th century dictators, because one of the best ways to also teach kids how to evaluate the claims of other worldviews is through history. So you can have, like John Stonetreet says, ideas have consequences, bad ideas have victims. Well, there you go. 20th century, millions of people died under this Marxist worldview. And we take the kids right into that. And most of the time, they're not really, in the schools, they're not really delving into, or they do get into world history, but not as deep as we're taking them.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. So check it out, friends, at Shanda Fulbright, Expedition to Reality. Also want to remind you, be at the University of Nebraska on the 12th. That's this Wednesday. Next week, William and Mary on the 20th. Also, this Monday, we're continuing at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, The Bible You Never Knew. This is going to be an amazing series. Check it out, 7:30 p.m. on our YouTube channel. And Lord willing, see you here next week. God bless.
If you're looking for solid answers to life's biggest questions, don't miss the latest episode of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, OnePlace, and Podchaser. Tune in, discover the truth, and share it with someone who needs it. Let's keep spreading the truth together.